And she was writhing in pain and just moaning and just in terrible distress. She heard my voice and she goes, "Son, go home, I'm dying." And I says, "Mommy, please don't die." I ran across to her, held her hand, squeezed her hand and her leg. And standing in the corner in the same room was a nurse with her arms up in the air, and she was crying actually. And she kept saying, repeating, "There's no doctor, there's no doctor, there's no doctor." And I kept squeezing my mom's hand and she kept saying, "Son, go home." I says, "No, Mommy, please don't die."
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians to overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be. Visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. My guest today has a really remarkable story of success that begins with his birth in the Central African nation of Cameroon and continues through a highly successful career as a cardiovascular surgeon. And now he's a candidate for governor in the state of Pennsylvania. So let's hear Dr. Nche Zama fill in the details. What a pleasure it is for me today to be in conversation with Dr. Nche Zama up in Pennsylvania, where he is no longer doing work on the human heart. He's actually running for office. Nche, I don't know how to thank you so much for being with us because I know you've been a busy man.
Yeah, Randy. Well, thank you for this opportunity to chat here this evening. It's been a very busy year, actually, but things are coming along well, and I'm happy.
Delighted to hear that. Well, as we always do on Prescription for Success, we like to get started with your origin story, which is to say it's unique is certainly an understatement. You grew up in the Central African country of Cameroon, and tell us a little bit about your origins, and let's find out how from that environment you moved into an area of sophisticated science and higher education. What was the beginning like?
So, yes, as you stated, I was actually born in a little grass hut village in Cameroon, the northwestern part of Cameroon in Africa. And I was raised by Christian, conservative, illiterate subsistence farmers. My mom and dad were very loving, but were strict disciplinarians. And, we were just a normal village family at that time. And
just to give us a feel about how many citizens were there in that village?
Probably, I want to say about 5,000.
Okay.
I would say. And so it was a good-sized village.
Yeah.
And so at a very young age, I started to agitate that I wanted to go to school. And my parents kept telling me I was too young. And I kept agitating, and because I had an older cousin who was about 4 years older than me. And he would start at elementary school, actually. He was attending a Catholic school, missionary school. And, there was something about education that it just totally, completely transformed him. I mean, I loved his uniform. He was learning a new language, and he sang these nice Christian missionary songs that I'd never heard before. And just his mannerisms, his whole attitude.
Yeah, but just to make sure we have the entire flavor of what's going on here, it sounds as if in your little village that it was not necessarily a given that a child was going to go to school. Is that right?
That's right. Well, there were so few educational opportunities, and you're exactly right. And a lot of parents, as a child, you had duties. You joined your father and your mother on the farm, and so there was always something to do. And so this whole concept of education to a lot of villages was not something they really embraced. Mm-hmm. But my uncle, who sent my cousin to school, he had a couple of years of education. So there was just something, he knew something that probably my parents didn't know, And well, in any case, so at 3 years of age, my uncle finally took me to a school. It was a Presbyterian school, but I was summarily rejected because they said I was too young. And so I was very sad. And the same day, when we left that school, he says, well, all right, well, let's go to the Catholic elementary school and see what they say. And we got there, same thing. It's too young. Go home, maybe come back next year or the year after.
Didn't even give you an audition.
Well, they didn't even give me a time of day. At least the first school, they got to talk to me and ask a few questions. And so finally, I got back to the village. I'm really down in the dumps, feeling down because I wanted to go to school. And it was just education. I wanted to be like my cousin. And so I had an uncle showed up and says, hey, did you hear the one about there's a new Baptist missionary school they're opening, And boy, we took off like a bat out of hell and trekking not too far away from the village. We got to the place and there was a long line of parents and students waiting to make their case for admission. And we joined the line. And when we got to the teacher, we call him the headmaster, he was the first teacher. And I can remember him like yesterday. Mr. Wanke was his name. There was a one-room school in a hut. And my uncle kept pleading with him. And I was standing here myself looking very sad and anxious. And so he looked at me and he said, and I remember like it was yesterday, he says, we'll take him. And so I started elementary school that day. And boy, was I excited. Okay. And as I've always said, I never went back to the village mentally because I started to learn new things and my mind was traveling around the world. I lived in the village physically, but mentally I was, gone. And then I was, at that time, living with my grandmother who was a leper. And, people didn't understand leprosy. She had lost her digits, her thumbs and her toes, and she was living alone in a neighboring village. And so my parents asked if I would live with her. Well, they didn't really ask. I said, you go live with grandma and you help her out. And so we lived together in that one room, tiny hut. So
were you serving more or less as her caregiver?
Yes, I was her caregiver.
I see.
I would watch. I remember distinctly a finger or two just falling off. The rots away, like with leprosy. Wow. And she had sores, and I would help clean them, and they smelled. But she was so loving, Grandma, And what really saddened me is oftentimes she and I would be walking to the farm or something, and people would see her and her deformities, and they'll shun her and make funny sounds and despise her. And I would get so angry, and she would look at me and say, son, don't get angry. She goes, within everybody, there's good and there's bad. You need to focus on the good. They're good people. They just don't understand. And so those were very powerful lessons in life that I began to learn living with my leper grandmother. And then I continued school. And when I got to the third grade, I was skipping a grade actually to the next grade, but they didn't have a new school. They needed to build a new school. So I got to the campus at the beginning of the year, and we were told, we couldn't continue there. So I trekked to another Baptist school, which was about, I want to say 6 to 8 miles away from the village. And that's where I enrolled. But it was just really difficult getting up every morning and trekking. A long walk through the woods. There was no highway.
Sure.
So my parents had me transferred back to that Presbyterian school that had initially rejected me a few years early. And And so I was closer to home. And every night, mom and dad, when she got home from the farm and she made dinner and we ate and had that kerosene lamp, she'd light it in the lamp and she'll have me sit down and say, son, sit your butt down and start studying. And I would do homework every single night. And I want to say 2 hours minimum. And things were going great. And there was something about education, I've always often talked about this, that my enthusiasm for education became infectious as far as my parents were concerned, to a point where sometimes my dad would ask me to teach him some of the things I'd been learning.
Really?
And, oh, yes. He was so excited. And I taught him the ABCs and numbers and stuff. You know, he's just a poor farmer. He couldn't read or write. And so at about 10 years of age, my parents got arrested because I had an uncle who had about a 6th grade education. And he was agitating about a new philosophy we'd never heard of, or nobody called democracy. You know, at that time we were in socialism and dictatorship.
So he was a troublemaker.
Troublemaker. And he would talk to people about freedoms and liberties and rights and, you know, to the natives. And the government got wind of it and they sent their agents to arrest him and kill him, really. And he heard about it and under cover of darkness, he ran away. And so when the gendarmes, the police, when they came and couldn't find him, they arrested my dad and mom. They thought they knew his whereabouts. And so they were taken to jail and left us poor kids alone in that hut. I'll never forget how sad, one of the most difficult times. I still oftentimes, my sister and I, my older sister, when we chat, you know, we reminisce, and that always comes up, how tough a time that was for us, you know. And my mother was raped in jail. My father was tortured. But eventually they were both let go and our lives continued. And then one day I was coming back from school. I was about 10 years of age. I ran into my Uncle Simon in the bush path somewhere. And he looked very anxious. I'd never seen that look on his face. And I go, what's the matter, Uncle Simon? Well, your mother's not doing well. She went to the hospital to give birth and she needs blood. So for a 10-year-old needs blood. I've never heard of somebody needing blood. So I ran off to the hospital. And when I got there, and it was just a hospital in name, there was one doctor at the hospital, only one doctor. And it was just a bush hospital. When I walked into the room, my mom was in a corner. There was blood flowing from her groin, making a puddle on the floor. And she was writhing in pain and just moaning and just in terrible distress. She heard my voice and she goes, son, go home, I'm dying. And I says, mommy, please don't die. I ran across to her, held her hand, squeezed her hand and her leg. And standing in the corner in the same room was a nurse with her arms up in the air. And she was crying, actually. And she kept saying, repeating, there's no doctor, there's no doctor. You know, there's no doctor. And I kept squeezing my mom's hand and she kept saying, son, go home. I says, no, mommy, please don't die. Unfortunately, she died. And I hadn't really seen my baby brother who had just been born a few hours before, you know. And unfortunately, a couple of weeks later, he too died because we didn't have a neonatal intensive care, all the resources we have in the modern world. But that night, as I left the room and I was walking back to the village, the words of that nurse were ringing in my ear. There's no doctor. So I decided I wanted to be a doctor because doctors save lives. And I didn't want any child ever to experience what I just experienced. And I didn't want any parent to have to suffer like my mom had just suffered. So I says, I want to be a doctor so I can save lives.
I got to tell you that the most powerful answer to the question, why did you want to be a doctor, that I have ever heard. Yeah. And I doubt seriously that it'll ever be surpassed. That is really powerful.
That's the day that I made the decision that I wanted to be a doctor. And so I got back to the village. And I have to tell you, 3 months before that, before her death, my mom and I had been sitting right in front of our hut in an afternoon we were chatting. I was mommy's boy, and there was the best boarding school, secondary school, was a few miles away from the village. And once a week, they let out those kids on Wednesdays to go to the city and run errands. And the path that they would take to the city came right in front of our hut. And so we're sitting there, my mom and I, and these kids come walking past and all handsome little boys dressed up in their uniforms. And my mother looked at me. I'm standing next to her, and she looked at the kids and she goes, "Son, that's where I want you to go to school. If you ever enter that school, I will die a happy mother."
Wow.
And so she goes, "That's the best school, and that's where I want you to go." And after she died, I went there to seek admission, and they didn't have room in the first year. They only had a spot in the second year. I says, "I'll take it." My same uncle again took me. And so I enrolled, and you can imagine it's like starting college in the sophomore year. And so I hadn't heard of chemistry, and the kids in the second year had a year of chemistry, year of physics, year of biology, math, geometry, trigonometry, all these new concepts I'd never heard of. So I would be studying first year material and second year material simultaneously. It's something, it's just very hard to describe. Those were probably the most challenging times in my life, my academic life. But most importantly, I've always said, God, on your journey in life, God plans angels along the way. And one of those angels, among many, was an American Peace Corps volunteer. And the Peace Corps movement was just very powerful at that time. And probably still is. And he took particular interest in me, and he would feed me books, incessantly, because I loved to read. I just had a voracious appetite for books. And one day he said, "Son, you're a very hardworking student," because I would leave campus sometimes and go to my farm. I had a little farm where I grew corn, pineapples, vegetables. I would sell to defray some of my school costs, expenses. And he says, "Son, you work very hard. If you go to America, you can be the doctor you've always wanted to be. Because if you work hard, 2 words in America, you would be successful." I remember those 2 words, work hard. So when I graduated, I applied to multiple colleges, but the schools I applied to in America, I would select schools with very low tuition because I knew I'd be working hard. I didn't have anybody to help sponsor me. And I got into a school in Baltimore called Coppin. And then one day the natives all sat around in our hut and they donated what amounted to $20 for pocket money. And my father sold our hut house with the crops around it and the land to a rich man and got $300. And with that, he bought me a one-way ticket to New York City.
My goodness.
Yeah. And here I was, I'd skipped about 3 or 4 grades total between elementary and secondary school. And I was just a little teenager when I arrived in New York City, not knowing any, all by myself.
What did you think of that when you arrived in New York?
Oh, man, I was scared. You got to read this book. I wrote this book. The title is Mommy, Please Don't Die, which is based on the last words I shared with my mother. But in that book, I detailed my first experience in America was, to say, challenging at best, because I exchanged the money that I brought. It was 10,000 francs, got about $20. I got scammed out of the money.
Oh, no.
I had enough to finally left the airport, and I got to Port Authority bus station, and there I encountered another angel, and he helped me out with the luggage. I must have looked really confused trying to negotiate, navigate through the subway. I'd never seen it, been on a train. I mean, there was just, everything was new. I'd never seen it.
Did you speak any English at that time?
Oh, yeah, I did, because I'd gone to an English-speaking secondary school.
I see. Okay.
And also I spoke French. Now I speak 6 languages, but then I only spoke about 3,
I see. Only 3.
Yeah. And so he gave me $20 and I was able to catch a bus to Baltimore. I got to Baltimore, same thing. Didn't have any money. A cab driver took me right across the street, up the hill to the YMCA, and where I checked in. They told me if you're in any city and you're stuck in America, go to a YMCA. And so I got in, and they allowed me to register without paying this, because I promised them I'll find a way to pay. And here I was up on the 8th floor. I'd never been anywhere that far up in the air from a hut. And I cried every day. I'd look down the window of the streets of Baltimore. I'd never seen so many people, cars, noise. I mean, emotionally just overwhelming. And I'm not hungry. I just didn't eat. I'll drink water from the faucet, cry all day, miss my parents, miss my mom. And then one day there was a knock on the door. I opened it. It was a young man, and he was older, obviously. He was a college student from Morgan State. His name was Bill. And he was a language major. He was working in the YMCA that summer, and he'd seen my name on the register. And he was curious. So he came upstairs and he goes, "You speak French?" And I says, "Yeah." So we started talking. And then subsequently, he would bring peanut butter sandwiches to feed me every single day when he came in to work. And I used to look forward to seeing him. And then he got on the college radio in Baltimore because, college students, he worked on the college radio, was a DJ. And he sent out a clarion call in Baltimore asking, would anybody be willing to house a homeless kid from Africa? Days turned to weeks. And one day I got another knock on the door, and they said somebody was looking for me downstairs. And I didn't ask, but I just wondered who in America would be looking for me. So I went downstairs, and a gentleman who was still so special to me, he's that other angel. He looked at me. He was elegantly dressed gentleman. He goes, "Are you Nche?" I says, "Yes." He says, "Go get your stuff and come with me. You can stay with me." And he was a nurse anesthetist. His name was Sam. He worked at Providence Hospital in Baltimore, had a 1-bedroom apartment. He bought a couch and a pillow, and that's where I lived my first year in America.
My goodness.
Yeah. Sam and I, as close as two people can. He's retired, lives in Alexandria, Virginia. And he took very good care of me. He'd drop me off every morning on campus. And I had a part-time jobs, give me bus fare, and he taught me the lay of the land and a little bit about American culture. And so
how did he happen to find you? Do you know?
Well, he must have heard the announcement on the radio, and he just, it's just, and I've always wondered, wow, why would anybody, a young man, single, handsome guy, just think about how, you're taking somebody like me, really cramping his lifestyle. But that wasn't important. My welfare was most important to him. And total stranger. While on campus, my chemistry teacher, Professor Pat McDermott, and he pulled me aside one day and he goes, "Son, this is a good school, but if you want to go to medical school, I suggest you go to Boston." He'd finished his PhD in biophysics in Boston. He goes, "If you graduate from one of those schools up in Boston, there are a lot of medical schools up there. You'll have a better chance of entering medical school."
So he had the Boston prejudice.
He had the Boston prejudice.
That's where all the smart people are, right?
That's where it all started.
I get it.
And so that summer, he got a government grant to do research at Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, on nickel-cadmium batteries, solar cells. And he had a little bit of money to hire a couple of lab assistants. And so he asked if I would be willing to work for him that summer. And then there was another kid who was originally from Thailand. His name was Surapon. He just graduated. He was a senior. I was a freshman. And this kid had graduated, and he was going on to Virginia Polytech or someplace to do a PhD. So he and I worked with Professor McDermott that summer. And at the end of the summer, I was the richest man in the world. I'd earned $1,500, $1,500. Wow. And armed with that money, I caught the Greyhound bus and headed north to New England.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians, for physicians, to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests, whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics. Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview. After you got your bachelor's degree and decided that you wanted to go to work on a PhD, what was the motivation behind that as opposed to trying to get into medical school?
Well, so I wanted to do research. I've always liked science, and I wanted to do clinical research as well as practice medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to be a medical scientist. I had met a gentleman at Johns Hopkins who had an MD and a PhD. And I thought the fund of knowledge that he had was so admirable. And as he talked about some of the research he had done, he had a PhD in biochemistry. And then I said, I wanted to be an MD PhD. So that was the motivation.
Yeah. So it was not, and this is very powerful for me. I mean, you described your circumstances, and one would think that you would want to head as quickly as you could go to something that would make a nice living for you, which medical school would have certainly done that. But yet you decided to go for the PhD, and we know how many unemployed PhDs there are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was a long road. I mean, I spent several years in the laboratory working and doing research. And you know, the irony of it all is that a lot of my research then was on heart disease, and the impact of certain elements like zinc and copper. Mm-hmm. And years later, it would come full circle because then I wound up being a heart-lung surgeon.
Sure.
You know? And so it gave me an in-depth understanding.
The decision to involve yourself in surgery, and particularly cardiopulmonary surgery, was that seed already well underway as far as germination while you were in medical school?
Yeah, well, Randy, your question sounds like you know a little bit about my background as a kid. I'll tell you something. You hit on the right nail here. When I was a kid, I was so curious about the inner workings. I had my Uncle Simon that I ran into who had told me about my mother was, having problems in the hospital. Well, he was a butcher. And every morning he would, get up about 5:30 in the morning to slaughter cows. And I would ask him if I could go with him. And it used to fascinate me to stand there and watch him slash across the chest. And then I see all the inner organs and their workings and stuff. And so I started to catch these. If you know anything about Cameroon, Cameroon is notable for the largest frogs in the world. You can have, no idea. Yeah, I mean, like the biggest frogs. You look it up. I mean, huge. And I would catch them and I'll cut them open. And I remember one time when I caught this frog and I cut it open, the chest, and I saw its heart beating, and I cut out the heart. And I had it in my hand and it kept beating. I ran into the hut and asked my dad, and I write about this in my book. And I says, Dad, the heart, why is it still beating? And his response, I remember till today, he said, that's the way God made it. It was very conclusive.
Well, there's a lot of truth in that.
It's a lot of truth. So my curiosity was still there. So when I look back, the connection with heart surgery actually started way back. The connection with surgery was a fascination watching my uncle Simon slaughter cows.
I'm not quite sure how to bring about this segue here because it's so incredibly unusual, I think. Clearly, you have had a very successful practice. You have had a very rewarding experience of sharing your skill and your expertise with people who wouldn't have had a chance if you hadn't shown up. I can't imagine how rewarding that must have been for you. And now you've reached a point in your life where you want to become in politics. And I won't go so far as to say most people, but a lot of people look upon politicians as sort of the bottom feeders.
Right.
So I'm interested to hear how you developed this interest and why you're running for governor in the state of Pennsylvania.
Well, first up, I thank God every day because statistically speaking, I shouldn't be sitting here actually chatting with you. And coming from where I came from a village in a grass hut, there's a great God above. I'm sitting here because of something I call educational empowerment. And one of the things I've done is build schools with like-minded friends. I currently support an entire elementary school because coming to America, this is a $20 investment by illiterate villages in Africa. And since I've been in Pennsylvania, I've had a robust mentoring program in whatever town, whether it's Philadelphia, Sayre, the Poconos, wherever I've lived. So many of those kids have gone on to become doctors, nurses, lawyers, school teachers. Every one of the kids who came to me because their parents were concerned and they'd heard about me and I've mentored them consistently over the years have been very successful. I just, as an aside, there's a young lady whose mother brought her to me, Yakira Mirabito, 13 years old. She was struggling and I mentored her. And then the years went by and I got curious. Thank God for Google. So I Googled her name. I was shocked. She was a top student majoring in material science and engineering at Northwestern University in Chicago. And as I read further about her experience in college, somebody interviewed her and says, what event in your life? Now, she's a stellar student. Material science and engineering is not easy, and this is that little scrawny girl that was in my operating room, timid, scared. I would motivate daily. And she goes, when I was 13 years old, a cardiothoracic surgeon took me under his wing and it transformed my life. And when I read that, I cried. I says, I've always said, whatever we do in our lives, it will only have meaning if it is undergirded by what value proposition it brings to our children. Otherwise, we're practically self-serving in our lives, and our lives have been in vain. And so a few years ago, when the COVID crisis hit, I was in the hospital. I was at the epicenter as a caregiver of COVID. And, if you're on the ventilator and you're still suffering because you can't get oxygen, your lungs are crappy, what do? They get a cardiothoracic surgeon to put you on ECMO. And then they put you on ECMO and to pump oxygen directly into your bloodstream. Well, I had this young lady I was working on with her kids. I'd seen the kids in the family waiting lounge and her husband. And I came home that day just feeling really bad and down about COVID and the scourge, And then I watched our governor on television and I heard him speak. I said to myself, there's got to be more humanity in his words, which I didn't see. And then he seemed so out of touch and didn't seem to know what he was doing. And we've all had that moment when God speaks to us. And God spoke to me soon after my mom died as I was trekking in the dark to the village. And I've said time and again in the past several months that there comes a time in our lives when silence is betrayal. That night, it came for me. And I says, I'm going to run for governor. And it's like every decision in my life, God speaks, I listen, and I embark on the trail. And that's the night I dropped the scalpel and I decided a year ago, I launched a campaign to be governor of Pennsylvania. And I've said Pennsylvania is sick and it needs a heart surgeon. And furthermore, I want to be a governor for the children of Pennsylvania.
Well, I got to hand it to you for one of the most moving stories of motivation that I think I have ever heard. But I'm going to have to ask you some practical questions.
Sure.
And I'm certain, because you're as intelligent as you are, that you realize you're entering politics during the most polarized period in my memory.
Yes.
And I've been watching it a long time. A lot of my relatives, when I was a little kid like you, were politicians.
Right.
Didn't have anything to do with it. But, time when we have two parties who are refusing to agree on anything, you've chosen to enter the field as a Republican when it's widely believed that no Republican can win anywhere without the endorsement of Donald Trump.
Right.
Trump has already endorsed one of your rivals. So what's your frame of mind as you begin to take this on?
Well, I have always said, yes, politics is a dirty game. Everybody says that. And the question I hear time and again, and I'm the first candidate who's visited all 6 or 7 counties in Pennsylvania. And right now, some of them I've been 6, 7 times, actually. And everywhere I would go with my team, my manager, people will stop me and say, you're too intelligent to be governor. And so the first time I heard it, I just started, I says, okay. So we go to the next county and a lady walks up to me and holds my hand and she goes, I really like you. I like what you say, but you're too intelligent to be governor. And I got home that night and I lay in bed and I said to myself, wow, that's how bad things are. It should be an asset, not a liability. It says that's how bad the state of affairs are in this state. And yes, people have told me time and again, ask questions. Why would you leave a great profession as cardiothoracic surgery and enter into dirty politics? Well, my response to them is, and it says, politics is just a den of thieves. And I say, well, there's 2 types of thieves. There's a simple common thief who steals your wallet or steals your purse. But what happens when you steal somebody's wallet or purse? They run after that thief. They got to catch him. If they catch him, they'll beat him up. They may even hurt him in other ways. They get the police, the legal system, they arrest him, they throw him in. They're very aggressive. I said, but the political thief, they don't steal your wallet. They don't steal your purse. No, they don't steal the money. They steal your education. They steal your health care. They steal your business. They steal your career. And they steal your future. But yet, day in and day out, people will line up to vote back in that political thief. Mm-hmm. I says, politics is not bad, it's the individuals in it. And I says, I want to change that. I want to flip the script.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. And I'm very interested to know, and you can approach this in any way you like, but right. What's your vision for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania? Have you got bullet points for things that need to be done?
Sure. I consider myself a conservative, compassionate, critical thinker. I've spent my life saving lives, making life and death decisions, being in leadership in medicine, being responsible for huge financial dashboard and clinical outcomes. But most importantly, I have a more holistic view on humanity than most, because I've been privileged to be in a profession that looks at people holistically and the issues. So when you come to me with a heart problem or a tumor in your lung, I'm not just looking at the anatomy. I'm looking at the circumstances in your life, your family, your children, how they impact your health and how they impact your recovery. And so it's given me a perspective. And actually, I would say I'm more prepared than any candidate to assume that type of leadership as governor of the state. So I have passion, understanding, and commitment. And so what are the issues that resonate with me? Obviously, all issues that concern people resonate, but more particularly in our state in Pennsylvania, if I start off, I would say one, our elderly and our veterans have been suffering way too long. Meanwhile, we're spending billions of dollars on illegal aliens when I watch our veterans and elderly sleeping under bridges and having to make a choice between buying insulin they need or their medication or putting food on the table. As a fellow human, I can't go to my grave knowing that I can make an impact with others that are like-minded. So that's a very important platform for me. And elderly who are forced to pay property taxes. Meanwhile, there's so much mismanagement in politics. We're not a poor state. If we were a country, we would be number 16, 17, or 18, depending on the vagaries of global commerce. We're an $800 billion economy. We're not poor. We're just not managed right. I want to take the politics out of human care and inject humanism in it. And I know I can, because there are many like-minded people that are looking for that type of pragmatic leadership to do that. And what's more, I want to protect the innocent. You know, abortion has become a hot button topic. And if you're not aware, Pennsylvania, we've been losing population, and it's a big deal. We actually have lost congressional seats, you know, even this year. And it always amazes me how people are out there promoting abortions, but then saying we're losing population. I mean, it's just such a discordance, you know, if there's a word that can really describe that. And I said to myself, we all agree that life begins at conception. Why do people then support abortions? It shouldn't be it's a moral thing. God commands us to protect life. Everybody who listens to me in my travels, somebody made a moral decision to not take their lives, you know, from us, from humanity. And so those are issues that I believe that I can make a difference that resonate with me and on my platform. And then we're in Pennsylvania. We have one of the largest energy resources in the world. If we were a nation, we would be number 4 for energy. Yet people in Pennsylvania can't even afford to heat their homes. I see patients who come in, you know, freezing, their wounds are not healing well. I can't afford the heating bill. But we have policies that prevent us from utilizing those resources. I want to be the governor that addresses energy from a human perspective and also affordable, reliable energy supplies. And also economically, I want to open new markets overseas. As I said, I speak 6 languages. I've traveled the world. There's no candidate who can feel as comfortable as I do in any longitude and latitude. The number one constraint for economic growth in all developing countries, evolving economies around the world is what? Energy. Pennsylvania's got it. So you can see what an explosive revenue flow you would get by opening up our markets and eliminating these archaic policies. When I say energy, I say environment, because you can't do one without the other. I love the environment. I believe that we can use our resources and at the same time protect our environment. I'm a scientist, so I support clean energy research, but I'm a pragmatist. And I'm going to tell you, my brother, clean energy is not ready for prime time to take over from what we have. So decisions are being made, politicized human lives. I want to take the politics out of it. I want to be the governor. I've been as the cardiac surgeon. And agriculture, we're an agricultural giant. Do you know that Pennsylvania, revenue from agriculture in this state, it's an industry that's worth about $183 billion. Our farmers are suffering. They can't even afford fertilizer. Well, I want to be the guy who's a drum major for agriculture. Open new markets overseas. Provincial thinking, there's no more time for that. It's past. And then just blow up the economy here and take this to $1 trillion economy. And with that increased revenue flow, we can now begin to grapple and tackle and address the social ills that confront us. And finally, our educational system, we're failing consistently. This may shock you, and you look it up tonight. Pennsylvania consistently is at the bottom there in every ranking nationally in education. And we've got something I've described, and some of the candidates are now using the terminology as zip code disease, where the same zip codes year in and year out have poor performance. Well, guess what? I'm a guy who embraces excellence. That woman and that man in that grass hut, the one banner they wanted me to carry was what? Excellence. And I've said time and again that on a scale of desirable goals, excellence trumps diversity any day. And the only thing diversity does is beautify excellence. Well, I'll be that governor that promotes excellence in those communities where there's zip code disease and allows parents to have skin in the game with school choice. And furthermore, every child in elementary school on up will be exposed to vocational education, because not every child needs to follow the classic pathway to college. So what we need in Pennsylvania, and we will have under my leadership, is a Marshall Plan in education, because we now live in a knowledge-based global economy. And the ones that are going to succeed and excel, hey, computers were invented in Pennsylvania, but we never feature in any discussion about technology. So when you hear me say this state is sick and it needs a doctor, and sometimes people crack up, I says, it's not meant to be a joke. It really is.
You've got a really admirable list of accomplishments that you'd like to bring about.
Yeah.
And I think we all understand that in a democratic society, in order to do that, you have to create some relationships inside government in order to get things done. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and so forth and so on.
Yes.
Do you, well, I think that the answer should probably be obvious, but sometimes these relationships can be distasteful and uncomfortable. And as I was saying before, in this era, I'm seeing absolutely no effort to reach across party lines and get things done. What's your thoughts on that?
My brother, you're absolutely on target. People have asked me, and in a couple of the debates, they asked the candidates, what's the first thing you'll do when you get to the governor's office? And everybody always has something. He says, well, I'm going to cut taxes. And that's good, because it's one of the things I intend to do. I mean, we have some of the highest taxes in America. We're not business friendly. Too many regulations, archaic. That's going to be done. But my response always is, there's no agenda that you'll be able to accomplish. There's no strategy that's going to be worth anything if you can't bring people together. We're so disparate. We're so polarized, as you said. And everybody's carrying a different banner. But I've always said it's not as important to be uniform, but we must be united. And once we're united, we can focus on a common agenda and a common destiny. My own background itself from Africa puts me in an enviable position to bring people together. But most importantly, it's not about me. I cannot be bought. We got to keep the agenda about the people of Pennsylvania and the future of our children. And I think in doing that, even as I started running, I've had numerous supporters, I would call them disciples, there are many ways to describe them, who it resonates with them. And many of our legislators, many of our leaders in the state that have said, yes, we need to do this. And as I agree with you, we can't continue the way we are. We have to bring people together.
Well, Nche, you are very inspirational, and it's been a long time since I've run into anybody with quite so much optimism, and I have really, really enjoyed the conversation up to this point. But we have come to the point where I'm going to step aside for a moment and let you have the floor to yourself We'll listen while Dr. Nche Zama gives us his personal prescriptions for success.
Well, God has blessed me in life. I am at a stage in my life that I want to give back. I'm working on my legacy. People always ask me, haven't you done enough? I says, no, as long as we have breath, we have not done enough, because there's still another human being that needs our assistance, our help. I'm running for governor to be governor for our children. I have been in leadership positions in medicine for years. I've been making decisions about life and death issues. And I believe that God wants me on this mission to assume a new platform, a bigger platform to do more for others. My belief in leadership is that a leader is somebody who can convince you to drop your nets and follow him or her. Also, a leader, to me, is somebody who absorbs uncertainties. And these are clearly, attributes that I've demonstrated in my own work as a humanitarian doctor or as a leader in this industry. I've said to people, you cannot dismiss a 14-year-old who's been bitten by snakes, lived in a grass hut, had roaches seeking sanctuary in his ears. I've been on a mission ever since I was a child, and I believe that mission is not over yet. I believe I'm the ultimate package deal to be governor of Pennsylvania. Yes, it's not because of my degrees and qualifications. Yes, I'm a scientist with a PhD. I have degrees in management and I'm a medical doctor. It's because I have a heart for human service. And I've showed that thousands of times in the lives I've saved with my team across this great commonwealth and across the world. And most of all, I espouse excellence in everything that I do. As a leader in the healthcare industry, I have traveled the world. I could have spent that time enjoying myself, but no, I wanted to save lives. As a leader with a scientist, I will be able to be the ultimate drum major to articulate and support the issues, to carry the banner on issues that mean a lot to people in our communities: crime, science, technology, agriculture, healthcare. We've just gone through the COVID crisis, and we have about 24 viruses out there that are ready to enter. I think my background and my experience puts me in the best position to lead this state. And as a cardiac surgeon, every time you grab that scalpel, you own the outcome. And what's more, you have only one chance to get it right. And every decision you make must hinge on what's in the best interest of the ones that you serve. And also, as a cardiac surgeon, you can't shine the spotlight on me. I'm used to high performance teams. And so I believe in transparency, accountability, integrity, and team. I cannot be bought. In the final analysis, I also want to grow the Republican Party. There are more registered Democrats, 600,000 approximately more so than Republicans in the state of Pennsylvania. I'm the guy that can reach across on the other side to independents and Democrats. Therefore, I'm the only candidate who can win in November. And my candidacy actually will inspire many of our children who are languishing in communities in our inner city, who can look at me as the ultimate American dream, something that they can aspire to. A candidacy that tells them that excellence is the only banner they should carry, and that it trumps diversity and many of the crazy theories that we now hear about that really belong in the junk heap of history. And to understand that there's no affirmative action in global commerce. So when they pursue their educational options, they should pursue them fervently and carrying that banner of excellence. And finally, when our kids do this, they understand this, and they embrace excellence, Pennsylvania begins to win. When Pennsylvania wins, when Pennsylvania is caring and winning, the world is a better place. And I want to contribute to that better future for our children, the state of Pennsylvania, and the greatest country in the world, America. Thank you.
Dr. Nche Zama, it has been a great pleasure speaking with you today, and I can't tell you how grateful I am that you've taken the time. You have a very busy schedule. At the time of this recording, just a couple of weeks away from the primary, I think. So it's not lost on me that you had a lot of important things to do today, and yet you decided to sit down and have a conversation with me, and I'm grateful for that generosity. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can find you and things about you. If you'd like to share email addresses, again, the title of your book, and whatever you'd like to share, please.
So the book I wrote, and I would encourage people out there, I think it's a very good read. And if you buy it, you need to buy a box of Kleenex as well. And the title of it is Mommy, Please Don't Die. And the last words I shared with my mother before she died in my hands. I was 10 years old. And it's on Amazon, actually, so you can purchase it. And I encourage you to visit our campaign at www.zamaforpa.com. And if you're on Facebook, go to our campaign, Zama for PA, and friend us. You know, on Facebook, almost every day, I travel the state. And, if you have any questions, reach out to us. And also, we're a grassroots campaign, and we encourage donations to help us. So we appreciate your donations. You can do that on our website, and it tells you how to mail a check if you choose to use that option. And I just leave you with one thing. We're all connected. We're all brothers and sisters. And I remind you of my favorite metaphysical poet, John Donne, as I come to the end here, who said something 400 years ago that still resonates today, that no man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. And he went on to say that any man's death diminishes me because I'm involved in mankind. Therefore, never ask to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. The bell has been tolling for me, and I intend to respond, to act, and that's why I'm running for governor, so that I can respond to the needs of the people in this great commonwealth. And I need your help to help me get to Harrisburg. And I promise you, I'll never let you down. I love you. Thank you.
Dr. Nche Zama, cardiothoracic surgeon and candidate for governor for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you, my brother, and God bless you. I hope to chat with you again in the future.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We would really appreciate a 5-star rating from you. These ratings give us much more visibility, and they help us reach many more listeners. If you'd like access to exclusive content, head on over to our Patreon page, where you can see membership-only material, including personal rapid-fire Q&A sessions with our guests and more. To be sure you never miss an episode, visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com to subscribe. And while you're there, you can offer your very own prescription for success on SpeakPipe. Special thanks to Ryan Jones, who created and performs the theme music for the show. And remember, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.